Kia ora and greetings from New Zealand Aotearoa. My name is Billy Takahika and I'm the former leader of New Zealand's largest civil liberties political party called the New Zealand Public Party. I am now an investigative documentary filmmaker and have just released episode 1 of my documentary called River of Lies, the New Zealand Scamdemic investigative documentary. You can check this documentary out at our website at www.riveroflies.co.nz. I would like to take this opportunity to announce the launch of the New Zealand Citizen Covid-19 Inquiry, or NZCCI. During the previous 3.5 years, New Zealanders suffered immensely under the tyrannical COVID rule of the New Zealand Labour government under former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and her relevant ministers. According to this government's own figures, their response caused massive economic harm through incredible national debt and the destruction of thousands of small businesses and countless jobs. But other significant harms were also evident, and we saw dramatic increases in social harm such as domestic violence, violent crime, murder, the abuse of women and children, suicide, mental health problems, loneliness, and families destroyed and alienated from each other. New Zealand is a deeply wounded country. Some of the other serious consequences of the government's response to COVID-19 included the loss of civil and human rights, with the loss of freedom of speech through censorship, the right to freedom of movement, the right to protest peacefully, and the dividing of our country into two groups, vaxxed and unvaxxed New Zealanders. And the unvaxxed New Zealander, for a period of time, was considered a non-citizen and lost everyday rights. Yes, New Zealand, the land of the long white cloud, famous for our clear thinking and freedoms, allowed a new form of apartheid into New Zealand that alienated people like me from society. This is the same New Zealand that famously protested against apartheid when the South African rugby team visited our country in 1981. When we aggregate all of these harms and look at the picture this creates, we see an incredible amount of damage, which seems almost insurmountable to overcome. But it possibly gets worse. At the top of this list of harms caused by the New Zealand Labour government's response to COVID-19 would have to be the very real possibility of serious harm caused by the COVID-19 vaccines that they introduced into New Zealand. The New Zealand Ministry of Health's own Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or CARM report, shows us that almost 65,000 Kiwis experience adverse health events following receiving COVID-19 vaccines. This ministry also admits that this report likely only represents 5% of the actual number of Kiwis that had adverse events. Inexplicably, earlier this year, the CARM report system was closed down after delivering just 46 reports. To accept this onslaught of medical tyranny, New Zealanders were subjected to an unrelenting campaign of fear that told New Zealanders that if we got infected by COVID-19, we could die. Night and day, through every media format, we were saturated with horrifying COVID news, constantly bombarding Kiwis with a message of fear. But the trick was this: we had to obey everything that the government said, otherwise we could die from COVID-19. We also saw the government, through a paid-for mainstream media, run a ruthless and brutal campaign to discredit and slander any Kiwi that dared challenge or raise concerns about the government's official narrative about COVID-19. The New Zealand mainstream media were richly rewarded for doing this in the form of grants from the New Zealand Public Interest Journalism Fund that the New Zealand Labour government had set up. This was further supplemented by hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer-funded advertising. It was a thorough campaign, a total campaign of horror against the people of New Zealand. And the result is this: a broken country and a society that has lost its innocence, and millions of New Zealand lives negatively impacted. With your help, the New Zealand Citizen COVID-19 Inquiry, NZCCI, is going to investigate possible crimes that were committed by the New Zealand Labour government through its COVID-19 response program. Calmly and methodically, NZCCI will leave no stone unturned during our investigation of every aspect of the government's COVID response. Every aspect. I wish to show you the terms of reference for our inquiry. Let's take a moment to look at our document, which has these details in it. Let us begin by reading the introductory piece of this document. The scope of this inquiry is a criminal investigation on behalf of the citizens of New Zealand. The Citizen COVID-19 Inquiry is conducted on behalf of the people of New Zealand. We will investigate possible crimes that were committed by the New Zealand Labour government through the response to COVID-19. We are committed to accountability and transparency in the way we conduct this inquiry. Our team of investigators and legal advisors will ensure that the inquiry is conducted according to the highest evidentiary standards and that the administration of the inquiry is carried out with rigorous financial and legal oversight. The New Zealand Citizen COVID-19 Inquiry team will discharge our roles to the very highest standards of conduct and integrity. I want to address some of our terms of reference here. It's very, very important that the range of the inquiry covers a whole schedule of issues that we need to understand. Here are some of the points in our terms of reference. Number 1, what are the harms caused by the New Zealand government's COVID-19 Public Health Response Act? 2, was the strategy of the government's response to COVID-19 justified by science? 3, did the government know early on that the disease had a low risk of mortality to most New Zealanders? If so, why did they implement response activations that caused so much harm to New Zealand? 4, were lockdowns justified as a means of dealing with COVID-19? 5, what was the procurement process for COVID-19 vaccines? There's several other points about this in the terms of reference. 15, what did the CALM COVID Adverse Events Report tell us? 16, what data does the Ministry of Health have about vaccine death or injury? 17, did the government and relevant ministers and officials knowingly lie to the public or hide or misrepresent any data about the vaccines? 18, did the New Zealand Labour government use propaganda against the public? 20, what was the economic cost of the government's response? 21, who was New Zealand in debt to because of the COVID response strategy? 22, what is the social cost and was it justified? 23, can it be proven that politicians, officials and their advisors, through either negligence or malfeasance, caused harm to New Zealand citizens and our economy by their COVID response and advice to New Zealand citizens? The information I just shared with you is only a small glimpse of what the document actually contains, but I hope it gives you a picture of how broad our terms of references are. I also hope that it gives you a sense of the type of questions we'll be asking, the information we'll be seeking, and the answers that we'll be looking for. Over these past almost 4 years, I and many other brave Kiwis, including whistleblower Barry Young, have been persecuted and prosecuted for standing up against what I consider to be a campaign of terror that has no justification. New Zealanders who said no to face masks and lockdowns, or who refused provisionally approved vaccines of the type never used before in humans, were subject to ridicule, loss of businesses and employment, and became marginalised citizens in our country. I have communicated with many concerned Kiwis who have lived with the fear of knowing that at any moment government officials could use the power of the Covid-19 Public Health Response Act to enter their homes and perform a medical procedure on them or even remove them from their homes. This can be done without a policeman being present or even a warrant, and can be enacted only on the suspicion you may have been exposed to COVID-19. After the introduction of the Covid-19 Public Health Response Act in March 2020, New Zealand officially behaved like a police state, and New Zealand descended into a dystopian nightmare. The citizens of New Zealand now need to know if by rolling out these COVID response initiatives that the government was acting lawfully and with scientific justification. We also need to know and understand if all aspects of the response followed correct processes of safety assessment and due diligence before implementation, and if the government failed to act in any way in the best interests of the people. I want to be very clear about an important point. I am a Christian pastor, and NZCCI's intent is to help heal our land and its people through exposing the truth about COVID-19. If required, NZCCI will demand justice on behalf of those people who were hurt without justification by the New Zealand Labour government. NZCCI may seek personal accountability from politicians, officials, academics, and even media if it can be proven that they in any way acted in a manner that was harmful, negligent, criminal, or dishonest with the people of New Zealand. NZCCI will seek reconciliation between the people of New Zealand and our government once the truth is revealed and justice gained. With your help, the NZCCI and I will press forward with a plan to heal and restore our families and rebuild trust in our community again. But this trust must be built on a foundation of truth, justice, and reconciliation. Thank you very much for watching this broadcast, and thank you for your support of this most important work we are about to do. There are 2 government-controlled inquiries about to begin about the same issue, but I believe that this inquiry that we will execute on behalf of the people of New Zealand is the one that needs to be carried through to completion. Thank you for your consideration of my plea and request for your support of this most important work. As we end the year, I pray for you and your families to be in God's mighty care, and I pray that you will keep the peace in your spirit. The truth is coming.